Welcome to our channel Tales of Justice. Enjoy watching. The bullet ricocheted off the steel frame of the gurney and into the ceiling. 4 operatives were bleeding in the nooks and crannies of the pediatric corridor. The protocol was to hide. But Marcella Dominique didn't know how to hide. She'd known that for a long time. She skirted the supply drawer, passed the staff break room, and went straight to her locker. The night shift at the trauma center at Houston's Harris County Hospital is a world unto itself. Outside, it might be 95 degrees or a tropical downpour, but inside, it's always the same. Fluorescent lights, the smell of hand sanitizer, and someone else's pain. Marcella had been working here as the head nurse in the emergency department for 8 years. Before that, she spent 2 years in Galveston and 3 in San Antonio. 44 years old, with dark circles under her eyes that makeup no longer concealed, and a photo of 8-year-old Amelia on her locker door. Amelia, daughter. The only person in the world for whom Marcella held on to this job, this life, this city after everything else fell apart. That night, Thursday into Friday, just after 2 o'clock, she was filling out a chart for a patient with a broken collarbone. The usual August chaos: a drunk construction worker with a slash on his forearm, an elderly woman with blood pressure 220/140, a teenager with a dislocated shoulder. Nothing out of the ordinary. Then something thundered outside. Not an explosion, a thud. Heavy, with a distinctive metallic groan, the sound of several tons of iron colliding with a concrete curb at high speed. Marcella didn't look up from the monitor. She simply said, "Texas, get the gurney to the exit. Reyes, call the operating room." By the time the ambulance hit the emergency room gates, shattering the side window and denting the dashboard down to the dash, Marcella was already standing at the entrance. A black GMC Yukon with tinted windows, 4 holes in the right door, so closely spaced they could only have been made by someone skilled in shooting. The engine was smoking, the front axle was clearly broken, the car was crooked, leaning onto its right side. The door swung open from the inside before any of the staff had time to approach. 3 people climbed out. Marcella had seen all sorts of people in this emergency room. Gunmen with guns, accident victims, workers after oil refinery explosions. But these 3 were different. They were moving. Despite the wounds, despite the blood, they moved with a coordinated movement, like a single machine. Each wore unmarked vests, gloves browned with blood. The one in front was dragging the second under the arms. The third was walking backwards, holding his weapon horizontally at waist level, controlling the space behind the car. "We need a surgeon," said the front one. The voice is broken but clear. "Now." His left arm was useless, hanging at his side at an unnatural angle. With his right, he pressed a dark red swab to the wounded man's neck. "Put your gun on safety and hang it on your belt," Marcella said evenly. "Otherwise, no one will come near you." The man looked at her for about 3 seconds. She didn't look away. Then he clicked the safety catch and dropped the rifle onto his belt. "He has a blood pressure problem in his neck," he said as Marcella knelt down next to the wounded man. "They put QuikClot in, but the pressure's dropping. It's been about 20 minutes since the injury." "What kind of blood?" "The second is negative." "Reyes," she shouted without turning her head. "Massive blood transfusion, O negative, right now. Texas, OR3, now." The wounded man was gray. His lips were blue. His pulse was weak and thready. Marcella worked her hands and simultaneously looked at the man who had dragged him in. "You need to secure the hospital," he said. He leaned against the wall. He pulled a laminated card from his breast pocket and handed it over. Lieutenant Narvaez, Special Operations. We're carrying intelligence materials. The people following us won't stop at the entrance. From the depths of the corridor, Resident Paul Weston emerged, young, pale, holding a clipboard. He froze, looking at the blood, the weapon, the tactical gear. "Who's behind you?" he asked. The light blinked, once, twice, and went out. 3 seconds of darkness, the longest 3 seconds Marcella could remember in years. Then the generators in the basement began to howl, and the corridors were bathed in red emergency lighting. Everything became flat, unsettling. Shadows fell at different angles. Somewhere in the depths of the hospital, a door slammed. "They cut off the main line," Narvaez muttered, taking out his radio. White noise emanated from it. "They're jamming locally. The phones are dead too." "Who are they?" Marcella asked, continuing to work on the wounded man. "A private military group, Vector Security, registered in Delaware. They're essentially mercenaries working without a government contract. We have evidence that their owner orchestrated an attack on American diplomatic personnel in Colombia to secure a contract to protect the embassy. The documents are being sent to Washington. He'll pay any price to prevent that from happening." At that moment, a light glided through the shattered doors of the reception area. No headlights. 2 dark armored vehicles rolled into the unloading area, silent as sharks underwater. 8 men wearing panoramic night goggles emerged, weapons slung over their shoulders. "Get down!" Narvaez barked. The glass shattered. This isn't a movie. In movies, gunshots are loud and clear. In reality, suppressed rifles sound like a pneumatic stapler, bang, 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 but the air is torn to pieces with a deafening supersonic crack. The walls in the reception area were lined with drywall. It was crumbling in pieces. The pressed wood registration desk was crumbling under the lines. Marcella grabbed Weston by the shoulder and threw him to the floor behind the counter. "Take the patients away," she hissed. "Everyone to the inner corridors. Code black. Lock all doors. Do you hear?" He nodded, white and trembling, but he stood up and ran. Narvaez and his third operative, a huge, silent man named Drake, returned fire. Their silent carbines boomed like artillery in the confined space. They took out 2 attackers immediately, but after the second flash grenade, everything changed. Marcella didn't have time to cover her ears. The flash was like a small sun. A shockwave passed through her chest. For a few seconds, she heard nothing but ringing and saw nothing but white. When her vision returned, the corridor was filled with smoke. Narvaez was kneeling. Blood ran down his temple from under his tactical helmet. Drake lay next to him, unconscious, with a darkening spot on his left shoulder. The group of attackers, now 6 strong, blocked the exit from the emergency room and forced them into a narrow disinfection corridor between the emergency department and the main building. A dead end. The fire doors at the end of the corridor were blocked. Without main power, they wouldn't open automatically, and the manual controls were located at the security post. Narvaez ejected the empty magazine. He reached for the next one. Empty. "You need to leave," he said, looking at Marcella. His voice was quiet, not panicked, just a statement. "Ventilation, right now. When they enter this corridor, they'll clear everyone out." Marcella looked at him, then at the nurses and orderlies huddled behind the medical carts. Then down the hallway to where the staff corridor and locker room were. Something in her, something she had kept bottled up for 12 years, stirred. "Hold on for 3 minutes," she said. Narvaez opened his mouth. 3 minutes, Lieutenant, she repeated, and she left. She left the way she knew how to leave in the darkest alleys of the most dangerous cities, not quickly, but precisely. Without wasted movement. The rubber soles of her sneakers made no sound on the linoleum. She didn't run, she glided, keeping close to the wall, using the shadows. The locker room was 2 corridors away from the combat zone. The red emergency light was weaker here, only a strip of the emergency exit above the door. In this reddish gloom, she reached her locker. Locker number 19. On the outside, it's just like any other. Gray metal, a small lock, a magnet with Amelia on the door. Inside, a change of scrubs, a stethoscope, a thermos she never washed as thoroughly as she should have. She unlocked the lock. She pulled the things aside. She pressed her thumb against the seemingly solid back wall of the locker, where there was a slightly darker stripe around the perimeter. The microscanner read the fingerprint. Click. The false wall slid open. In a niche behind some metal and drywall sat a briefcase. Dark gray, aircraft-grade polycarbonate. Dust covered the lid. It hadn't been opened in a while. An 8-digit code. 3 unsuccessful attempts, and the contents would be destroyed. Marcella entered the code without hesitation. The smell. The first thing she noticed. Gun grease and a specific polymer. She would never forget that smell, even though she hoped she had. Before she was Marcella Dominique, the head nurse, Amelia's mom, the person who makes the perfect pumpkin pie for Surgeon Lee's birthday, she was an operative. 5 years in a reconnaissance team, attached to the Army's intelligence support group. Not just a combat medic, an infiltrator. Someone sent to places that don't exist on maps, with missions that don't exist in documents. Kabul, Honduras, the Syrian borderland. She pulled people out of places no one else could go because she knew medicine, she knew languages, and she could be anything. Her call sign was static. Not because she was loud, quite the opposite, because she emitted static. Any tracking device within her radius began malfunctioning. It was a metaphor, of course, but it stuck. She left after Honduras, after a year of not being able to look her daughter in the eye without thinking about the fact that no one would guarantee her return home. She promised herself, only to save. Never again, the opposite. But those who were now walking through the corridors of her hospital with suppressed carbines were going to kill her staff. The word was officially suspended. She quickly donned a lightweight bulletproof vest, thin, worn under her clothes, with Velcro fastenings. She drew her weapon. The main feature is a modified compact carbine based on a platform with an integral suppressor. It fires heavy, subsonic, armor-piercing rounds. The shot is virtually silent. 30 rounds are in the magazine, with 3 more in the case. Under the barrel was a device she'd confiscated from a contractor back in Honduras and never turned in. She couldn't turn it in. It was her insurance policy. A compact, directional acoustic disorientator. A highly focused beam of sound frequencies that instantly attacked the vestibular system. It didn't penetrate armor, it ignored it. In a 30-degree cone, at a distance of up to 15 meters, immediate collapse, nausea, complete loss of coordination. A person in full tactical gear, exposed to such a beam, turned into a child just learning to walk. For a few minutes. The military abandoned this technology, too unpredictable, too cruel. Marcella now agreed only with the second argument. She strapped the second pistol, a HK-USP .45 caliber, to her hip. 3 spare magazines were on her belt. She lifted the top lid of her case. It contained 5 pairs of medical ties and a small tube of anesthetic gel, and pocketed them. She closed the locker. I left Amelia's photo outside. In the disinfection corridor, Narvaez used a scalpel like a throwing knife and hit. That bought them about 20 seconds. Then they ran out of scalpels. The group of attackers converged on the doors. 6 men in a tight pack. One gave the signal. They were ready to enter. They didn't notice how a technical panel in the ceiling behind them opened. Marcella had chosen the ventilation route through the HVAC unit 3 years ago, simply because she had a habit of knowing where to run if she had to. This route led directly to the utility closet adjacent to the hallway. She opened the closet door quietly, like opening a page of a book when a child is sleeping nearby. She slipped out into the corridor behind the stack. The 2 rear guards stood with their backs to her. Panoramic night vision goggles, meaning they could see forward and to the sides but not back. A mistake. She didn't fire the rifle, she picked up the device. A barely audible low-frequency hum, as if something was vibrating somewhere deep in the walls. Both rear guards collapsed at the same time. One tried to shoot. He simply pulled the trigger reflexively. The bullet hit the floor. He was already lying there, hunched over, his hands pressed to his helmet. He was vomiting right under his visor. The other, as if he'd forgotten the meaning of horizontal and vertical, simply slid down the wall. The 2 remaining in the stack reacted to the sound of the fall. They turned around. They saw a woman in a bulletproof vest with an unfamiliar weapon. They didn't have time to be surprised. 2 shots. Quiet, like someone clapping their hands twice in the next room. The heavy armor-piercing rounds passed through tactical helmets as if they were tinfoil. 2 more began to retreat using the medical carts as cover. Clever. But they didn't know this corridor the way she did. They didn't know that around the bend lay a narrow opening to the matron's station, and within it, a point from which both sides of the passage could be shot at. She moved through the hospital like water moves, always down, always along the line of least resistance, but eventually everywhere. Not directly. Through the technical area, through the storage room, through that corner everyone thought was a dead end, but which wasn't if you removed the metal shelf from its hinges. As she stepped behind the last 2 attackers, she switched the device to lethal mode. Quietly. Twice. Narvaez waited in the decontamination corridor. Drake was unconscious, but breathing. 3 nurses and an orderly huddled in a corner, hugging. Marcella punched the code into the keypad. The fire doors unlocked. She opened them and walked in. Narvaez looked at her for a long time. Then he looked at the 5 motionless figures behind her in the hallway. "Who are you?" he asked. "Head nurse of the emergency department," she said, handing him the carbine. "Take it, and don't step in the blood. I just washed the floors." "That's not all," he said. "They have a rapid response team, another team. They were supposed to enter through the industrial entrance at the back." "I know." Marcella was already turning away. "Paul, Weston." The resident peered around the corner. His face was chalky. "Drake to OR3. Lock the doors. Don't open until you hear the word Texas. Understood?" "Yes," he whispered. Out loud. "Got it, Marcella. Go." She looked at Narvaez. "The industrial entrance opens onto the corridor next to the old X-ray department," she said. "Come on, I have an idea for an MRI." The X-ray department was dark and quiet, only the hum of the backup circuits. Marcella led the way, Narvaez a step behind, guarding the rear with a captured carbine. You said they used thermal imaging? She asked without turning around. Standard equipment for night operations, FLIR, third generation. It's clear. They entered the MRI area. The machine stood in a spacious scanning room behind lead doors. It was a huge white torus with a mouth 1.5 meters wide. In standby mode, it emitted a barely audible hum. On the wall nearby was the control panel for the cryogenic cooling system, which maintained the superconducting magnets at operating temperature. Liquid helium, -269 degrees. Thermal imaging works by detecting temperature differences, Marcella said, opening the control panel. It sees heat against a cold background. But if the background and the object are the same temperature, the image turns into mush. She found the excess pressure relief valve and hit it with the back of the adjustable wrench she'd taken from the utility cart in the hallway. The valve blew. A thick white fog poured into the corridor. The temperature dropped in seconds. Steam came out of my breath. Their FLIR goggles will go blind within 20 seconds, Marcella said. They'll switch to white light. And in fog, white light scatters. They won't see anything. Footsteps came from the eastern staircase, even, heavy, professional. Marcella walked into the MRI operator's booth and opened the technical interface. Several years ago, on the night shift, when the entire staff was on call and radiologist Harrington couldn't handle a frozen system, she'd learned to manually start the machine, bypassing the software locks. Harrington later told her she shouldn't do that. She said, "I know." A rapid response team of 7 people, following the sound of footsteps, entered the fog. Their flashlights cut through the whiteout with bright beams, preventing vision beyond 2 meters. They moved tightly, 2 at a time, at short intervals. The host, a tall man with the call sign Prager, gestured toward the only warm doorway, the door to the MRI room. They entered. Marcella pressed start. The MRI came to life with a low, all-encompassing hum that made the floor vibrate. 3 Teslas, approximately 60,000 Gauss in the core. For comparison, a scrap metal lifting magnet operates at 2,000 Gauss. Briefings before entering the MRI area are not just for show. The first attacker lost his shotgun. It leaped from its strap so suddenly it dislocated his shoulder. The steel butt plate struck the side of the vehicle with a hammer-like crash. The second tried to hold on to the rifle with both hands but couldn't. The vehicle was pulling him harder than he could resist. He was thrown forward, face first into the vehicle's white hull and pinned there like a fly on paper. The third had a steel-tacked knife on a nail clip. The knife flew off, cutting the glove 1/2 inch and only accidentally missing the hand. Steel magazines, metal parts of belt systems, cleaning rods in pockets, spare eyeglass mounts, all of it was torn away, flying toward the magnet, clanging, beating, getting stuck. "Get out!" Prager shouted. 4 of the 7 escaped back into the fog, abandoning their gear. 3 remained, pinned by their own metal to the craft's outer hull, twitching and screaming. Narvaez fired through the cockpit window, briefly, accurately. 2 lost consciousness. 1 went silent. The 4 who had broken out into the fog switched to pistols. The cockpit window cracked. Marcella fell at the controls, and shards of glass passed over her head. "They're heading for the oxygen tanks," she told Narvaez. "Down the corridor behind us. If they get shot at, the explosion will cover half the wing." Narvaez swore and went out into the corridor, changing the magazine. Marcella rolled out of the cabin. The corridor floor was foggy. She could barely see her hands, only the light from the emergency strip near the baseboard. She picked up the device and activated it, a narrow beam into the fog, along the beam of a flashlight. One fell immediately, the second almost did. The third managed to jump around the corner. The fourth, that same Prager, turned out to be smarter. He didn't come toward her. He came out from the side. Marcella heard him before she saw him. She took a half step to the left. His elbow struck her glancingly. She didn't stay upright, but fell in a controlled roll, landing 3 meters away from him. Prager was big, about 95 kilograms without gear, judging by the way he moved. He looked at her through his broken glasses. "Nurse?" he said almost respectfully. "Seriously?" "Houston," she said. "What?" "Nothing, just saying." He struck, fast for a man his size. She ducked under his arm, grabbed his wrist and twisted. He was stronger. He broke free, pushing her into the wall. It hurt. Her ribs ached. From his belt he pulled out a ceramic knife. Not metal. It didn't react to the magnet, which meant he had prepared it specially. Professional. Marcella assessed this objectively, without malice. He went on the attack. She stepped forward. This always disarms those who expect retreat. She grabbed his knife-wielding arm in a painful hold, turning his kinetic energy against him. The elbow joint crunched. The knife fell. Prager didn't scream. He just hissed through his teeth. Marcella pulled the defibrillator toward her. It was hanging on the wall 2 steps away, in a standard red box, like in all the corridors. She removed it from its holders, set the charge to maximum. "It's not for fun," she said. "I know," Prager exhaled. "Then don't be offended. Discharge." Prager fell. His muscles spasmed for a second, then silence. He was breathing, unconscious. Marcella put the defibrillator back on the shelf. She grabbed the zip ties and secured his arms behind his back with medical cuffs. Then she straightened up. The corridor was quiet. The fog was clearing. The red light from the emergency lighting grew slightly brighter, meaning partial power had been restored somewhere, or my eyes were simply adjusting. Narvaez emerged from the smoke. He was limping. The blood on his cheek was drying into a dark crust. "That's it?" he asked. "That's it," said Marcella. She snatched a tactical radio from one of the motionless soldiers. She found the right frequency. Not right away, but she found it. Third try. "Sierra Bravo, call sign static." She spoke evenly. "I have a friendly package, call sign Narvaez, ready for extraction. Medical support and heavy convoy required. Location, Houston Harris County Hospital, industrial entrance. Tell Director Ferreira I'm awaiting official confirmation of receipt of materials, and that I'll bill for the broken windows." Narvaez stood next to her and looked at her the way people look when something has been unclear for a long time and suddenly becomes clear. "Static," he said. "I've heard that name. 2 years ago in Honduras. They said you were gone." "You were right," Marcella said. "I'm a nurse in Houston." And yet. She turned around and walked back to the emergency room. Along the way, she took off her bulletproof vest and tucked it under her arm. She shouldered the rifle, slung it under her jacket. Weston was waiting for her at the turnoff to the main corridor. Pale, trembling, with Drake on a gurney behind him. "Marcella," he breathed out. "There, in the operating room, Drake is stable. He couldn't finish. "You did well," she said simply. "Now we need a surgeon for Narvaez. His left shoulder may be through and through. And get Robert from neurology. He has 2 patients with vestibular problems in the East Corridor. They'll need an examination." "Are you serious?" he asked. "Now, after all this?" "It's my job," she said. She walked past him into the reception area. She stopped at the registration desk. It was chipped and dusty. One of the lamps over the workstation was swaying. Somewhere, water dripped from a broken pipe. Marcella picked up the medical record she'd filled out at the start of her shift, the one about the broken collarbone, from the counter. She found the right line and finished writing it. 40 minutes later, 3 unmarked armored SUVs and 2 more medical vans with federal license plates entered the industrial entrance. Narvaez was taken first. Before getting into the car, he stopped. He looked at Marcella. She was standing in the doorway of the emergency room, wearing crumpled scrubs and a bandage on her left forearm where a shard of glass had caught her. "The documents are with Director Ferreira," he said. "I know. Cross Security will be shut down. Their owner will be charged with 3 federal offenses." "Fine. You won't be asked to come back?" She was silent for a moment. "I've already been asked, several times. And? I have a daughter. She's 8. She has a swimming competition this morning." Narvaez nodded, understood. He got into the car. The cars drove away quietly, just as they had appeared. Marcella returned inside. The staff, frightened, nervous, but alert, were gradually returning to their posts. Reyes was already unfolding a new transfusion protocol. Texas was changing the IV. Weston was writing something on the chart. His hands were still shaking, but he kept writing. At 4:30 in the morning, the first routine patient was brought in. A traffic accident on the I-10. 2 people were injured, one seriously. Marcella went out to meet the car. "What do we have?" she asked the paramedic. "Blunt chest trauma, unstable blood pressure, heart rate 140, and an open tibia fracture. Texas, Oregon 2, Reyes, massive protocol ready. Weston, with me." They ran. The shift arrived at 7 in the morning. The day shift supervisor, Cordelia, appeared at the door with coffee and froze, staring at the broken glass, the bullet holes on the walls, and the fresh putty that one of the maintenance staff had already applied to some of the damage. "What was here?" she asked. "A restless night," Marcella replied, taking off her apron. "You have blood on your sleeve." "I've already processed it. Everything's fine." Marcella changed her clothes. She grabbed her bag. She pulled out her phone. Still dead, it was rebooting after the jamming was lifted. Messages appeared. 3 from Amelia's mother, the neighbor who kept an eye on her at night. Amelia was asking when you'd be home. "She's already up, eating cereal. Tomorrow's uniform is ironed and hanging on the door." Marcella stared at her phone. Her heart rate hadn't risen above 85 all night. Not once. That was her physiology under stress. But now, reading these 3 messages, she felt a tightening in her throat. Amelia was eating cereal. Her uniform was ironed. Marcella put her phone away. She walked out into the parking lot. Houston at 7 in the morning in August, already hot, already humid, already alive. Trucks were moving along I-45. Somewhere down the block, an air conditioner fan hummed. She reached the car, a beige Toyota Camry with a dent in the rear bumper that she couldn't get herself to fix. She opened the door, put down her bag. Amelia's backpack lay on the back seat, blue with a shark print. Amelia loved sharks. She said they were the most honest animals. They just swim, that's all. Marcella looked at the backpack for about 3 seconds. Then she started the car and drove home. 6 days later, the story appeared in Houston's largest newspaper. On the front page, headline, "Employees at Houston's Harris Hospital described the overnight attack." 15 people were detained, including security guards for a company linked to a federal investigation. The text stated that the investigation had established that employees of the private security company Vectus Security Group, acting on instructions from their superiors, attempted to destroy materials that later became key evidence in the case of an armed attack on personnel at American diplomatic facilities abroad. Vectus CEO Raymond Ford was arrested at his home in Austin at 5 a.m. on the same day the article was published. The article quoted Director Ferreira. Thanks to the unprecedented actions of the hospital's medical staff, civilian casualties were prevented. All patients and staff survived. Marcela Dominique's name was not mentioned in the article. That day, she was leading a morning debriefing with her department. She was explaining the new protocol for working with multiple trauma patients. Finally, she said, "Order in paperwork isn't bureaucracy, it's life." Then I drank coffee and straightened Amelia's photo on the locker door, and she went to see the next patient. At the competition, Amelia came in second in her group, winning a silver medal. She climbed out of the pool, wet and happy, and immediately ran to her mother, all the way across the edge, splashing water. Marcela caught her, hugged her, felt her wet hair tickling her neck. "Mom, did you see? Did you see?" "I saw it," Marcela said. "You were the best." "I was second." The best and the second. They can be combined. Amelia laughed, slipped out, and reached for a towel. "Are you tired?" she asked, looking around. "You're always like this when it's the night shift." "A little," Marcela said. "You're just like our coach. He also says the main thing is to get to the finish line. Everything else doesn't count." Marcela looked at her daughter. Smart coach. "Uh-huh." Amelia wrapped herself in a towel. "Shall we go have breakfast? I want pancakes." "Let's go," Marcela said. They walked out to the parking lot together. Amelia chatted about stroke technique and the girl from Galveston swimming alongside her, breathing too fast. Marcela listened, nodding. To the right, Houston ended. High-rises, overpasses, oil tanks on the horizon. To the left, September began, a little milder than August, a little less hot. Ford was in custody. The documents were in Washington. Narvaez was alive. The hospital staff is alive. Amelia is nearby. Marcela unlocked the car and threw her bag on the back seat next to the blue shark backpack. "Mom." "What?" "You're the best nurse in Houston. I know that for a fact." Marcela fastened her seatbelt and pressed the engine start button. "How do you know?" Amelia shrugged with that childish inflexibility with which only the truth is spoken. "I just know." They went for pancakes. 2 weeks after that night, Marcela realized she was being followed. Not right away. At first, it was just a feeling, dull, lingering, like a toothache you can still tolerate but already know you have to go to the dentist. She felt it at the supermarket on Westheimer, a man at the cereal aisle, looking at his phone, but it was off. Then in the parking lot of Amelia's school, a silver Nissan Sentra, which had been there on Wednesday and Friday, but not Thursday. Then, and this was no longer a feeling, but a fact, someone opened her mailbox at the entrance to her building. The lock was carefully picked without any trace of force and just as carefully closed. Whoever did it clearly knew how to use their hands. Marcela didn't panic. She made sure Amelia was visiting her grandmother in Pasadena for the weekend and called Narvaez. Narvaez didn't pick up the phone. She called the number he'd left on the piece of paper he'd stuffed into the pocket of her scrubs before leaving in the recovery vehicle. 2 rings, then an unfamiliar voice. "I'm listening." "I need Narvaez." Who's asking? Static. Pause. 3 seconds. Stay where you are. You will be called back within an hour. They called back 20 minutes later. A woman I didn't know. Her voice was professional, without intonation. "You're right," she said without preamble. "The surveillance began 4 days ago. We know." "Why didn't you warn me?" "We assumed you'd notice." Not an apology, just a statement. This isn't Vectis. Ford is in custody, his structure frozen. This is the other side. What other one? Ford had partners, quiet ones, without a public profile. He was a facade. They had money and connections. When Ford was taken, they didn't leave. They started looking for what wasn't in the case. Marcella stood by the kitchen window, looking out onto the street. The silver Nissan was out of sight now, but that didn't mean anything. What didn't get through? One of the data drives. Narvaez gave us 2. There should have been 3. The third disappeared that night in the hospital, in the chaos. Marcella closed her eyes for a second. "And they think I have it." "They don't think so. They know someone took it. You're the only person on staff who had access to all the areas that night." Their logic is simple. "I don't have a carrier." "I believe you. They don't yet." Marcella put the cup on the table. The tea was getting cold. "What do you want from me?" "Nothing. We want to solve this quickly. But to do that, we need to figure out where the carrier is. And you, though you might not know it yourself, might have a lead." "How?" "That night, in detail, everything you remember. Where you went, what you saw, who you saw, what was wrong. Sometimes the right person doesn't know they saw the right thing." Marcella thought. Then she said, "Where and when?" The meeting was scheduled for the next day. Not in the office or the cafeteria, in the surgical building, in a conference room on the 3rd floor, which was empty on Tuesdays between 2 and 4. Marcella herself had suggested it. She knew her territory better. The woman arrived unaccompanied. About 40 years old, with a short haircut and a gray jacket. She called herself Cassidy. No rank, no affiliation. Marcella didn't ask. Narvaez was there too. His shoulder was bandaged, and there was still a bandage on his left arm, but he was moving normally. He nodded to Marcella as if she were an old friend. "Tell me about that night," Cassidy said. "From the moment the car pulled into the emergency room." Marcella spoke methodically, without skipping a beat. Cassidy didn't interrupt, taking notes in her notebook. Narvaez listened, nodding occasionally. When Marcella got to the part in the decontamination corridor, how she was leaving through the vents to the locker room, Cassidy raised her hand. "Stop. Which areas did you pass through on your way to the locker room?" "Through corridor B, past the pharmacy warehouse, then through the service passage near the laundry room." By the laundry room, Cassidy noted something. "Was there lighting there?" "Emergency only, red light." "Did you see anyone there? Any of the attackers?" Marcella thought. "No, I walked through the shadows on purpose. There was no one there." "And from the staff?" Marcella was about to say no, then she stopped. "Security guard," she said slowly. Narvaez and Cassidy exchanged glances. "Tell me," Cassidy said quietly. "I hardly noticed. There was a security guard sitting by the laundry room. He was oddly positioned, not standing against the wall like usual. He was sitting on the floor with his back to the laundry room door. I thought he was shell-shocked from the flash drive explosion. His head was down. He wasn't moving." "Name? Appearance?" "I don't remember the masks. He was wearing a hospital security uniform. Dark blue shirt, badge on his chest. Light hair, I only saw the top of his head. "This is not our security guard," Narvaez said. Cassidy looked at him, then at Marcella. "Are you sure he was wearing the uniform of your hospital?" "Yes, I saw the logo." Marcella frowned slightly. "But now that you ask, our guards all evacuated that night under Code Black protocol. I saw them leave through the west exit myself." "So the person you saw at the laundry wasn't one of your staff," Cassidy said. There was silence in the room. The air conditioner gently blew cool air. "He took the carrier," Narvaez said, "in the chaos, using someone else's form as cover." "What time was it?" Cassidy asked. "About 2:45. I didn't look at the clock specifically, but yeah, around there. So he had time to leave before we arrived." Cassidy closed her notebook. "Marcella, do you have any security footage from that night at the hospital?" "There should be. The backup server writes even without the main power supply. It's on a separate source." She paused. "But only the head of security has access to the archive. And the senior medical staff are in emergency mode," Narvaez added. He'd clearly studied the hospital's structure in advance. Marcella looked at him. "You checked." "I always check when I'm interested in a place," he said without apology. She was silent for a second, then she stood up. "Let's go to the security service. There was an archive for that night. There were no recording interruptions. The backup server worked without a hitch. The camera by the service entrance to the laundry room, a corner one near the ceiling, recorded at a resolution high enough to make out a face in normal light. Under emergency red light it was worse, but something was there. The head of security, an elderly Mexican named Hugo, eyed the three of them with undisguised suspicion. Then he looked at Marcella. Marcella looked at him. "Hugo," she said, "do you trust me?" "I trust you," he muttered. "Then give us 15 minutes with the archive." He left without slamming the door loudly, which meant consent to him. Cassidy worked quickly through the archive. She found the right time period and scrolled through it. A camera outside the laundry room, 2:47 a.m. local time. A silhouette by the door, illuminated by the red emergency light, sitting on the floor, head down, wearing a security uniform. "Stop," Marcella said. Cassidy stopped recording. "Right here, on his belt, on the right, see?" They looked. There was something on the man's belt, a small rectangle in a matte case, wedged between his belt and his clothes. Not a standard holster, not a radio. "The flash drive is in the case," Narvaez said quietly. "He already took it by now." "Scroll further," Marcella asked. 2:51 a.m. The man stands up. The camera is filming from above and at an angle. His face is hidden. He holds his head down, as if he knew the camera was there. A professional. He walks toward the technical exit, the place where medical waste is usually removed. "The technical exit gives direct access to the alley," Marcella said. "There's no second camera there. Hugo's been asking for one for a long time, but the budget." "I see," Cassidy said. "Wait." Marcella leaned closer to the monitor. "Rewind, 3 seconds." Cassidy scrolled. "There," Marcella pointed. "His right hand. When he stands up, he leans against the door frame, and he has, right here, on his wrist, a tattoo." The image was grainy, but there was something there, dark, angular. "It's impossible to make out," said Narvaez. "We can't do that here," Marcella said. "But we have image enhancement software in radiology. We use it for X-rays, but the algorithm is the same." Narvaez looked at Cassidy. "She's better than our analyst," he said. The radiology department was almost empty at the time. One technician was dozing at the counter. Marcella quietly walked past him to the workstation. She uploaded a frame, launched the enhancement algorithm. The program thought for about 2 minutes, then the picture became clearer. The tattoo on her wrist was legible. An eagle with outspread wings, stylized, military in style. Beneath the eagle were numbers or letters, illegible. But the shape of the eagle itself was unique. It wasn't a mass-produced tattoo studio. Someone had done it to order. "I've seen one like that," Marcella said. Narvaez turned to her. "When?" "The same time, that night." She spoke slowly, dredging up memories that had lain there unnoticed. "When the first group entered the emergency room, one of them, whom I later bound with zip ties. When I took off his gloves to secure his wrists, he had something on his right wrist. I didn't think about it specifically, but a similar eagle." Silence. "They are from the same structure," Narvaez said. "Or from the same unit," Cassidy corrected. "Ford used Vectis as the top layer. Beneath it, another, a more secretive one, the one that operated in parallel that night. While Vectis was making noise at the entrance, our man was working quietly inside." "A distraction," Marcella said. "The entire assault was a diversion," Narvaez said slowly. "They knew we'd have time to escape. They didn't need to destroy us. They needed to create chaos so their man inside could do his job." Marcella looked at him. "This means they had information in advance that you were going to this hospital." "Yes." "Leak?" "Yes." The word hung in the air. Cassidy didn't deny it. "That's why Narvaez didn't answer the phone," Marcella realized. "You're checking your perimeter." "We're working on it," Cassidy said shortly. That evening, Marcella returned home later than usual. Amelia stayed with her grandmother until Sunday. The apartment greeted her with silence and the smell of stale air. She hadn't left the windows wide open in a long time, an old habit. She made tea. She sat in the kitchen. Outside, Houston was turning from yellow to orange. The sunset over the oil refineries cast a unique, almost Martian hue. She thought about the carrier, the third flash drive. Whoever took it knew where to look, meaning they knew what the 3 people in that car were carrying. This wasn't some random looter in the chaos. This was someone with a mission and information. Marcella hadn't previously asked herself, why did Narvaez come to this particular hospital? Houston is big. There are plenty of urgent care centers. Why Harris? She put the cup down. Because I knew she was here. Not necessarily Narvaez personally. Maybe someone planning the route knew Static was working at Harris Hospital. Insurance, in case things went wrong. Everything went wrong. The insurance worked, but someone else knew about the insurance. She picked up the phone and dialed Cassidy. "Do you have a personal file on me?" she asked without preamble. Pause. "Marcella." "Not Marcella. Answer the question." "Yes, I have." "Who had access to it over the last 6 months?" Another pause. Longer. "This is a difficult question." "I understand. That's exactly why I'm asking." Cassidy paused. Then, 4 people with direct access, plus a system administrator and his deputy. 6. Yes. I need to know which of the 6 could have passed on information that I was working in Houston. I can't. Cassidy, Marcella said quietly but firmly, I'm being watched. My daughter is being watched. They won't leave me alone until they find the carrier or decide it's easier to eliminate me as a potential witness. I'm not asking for an internal investigation. I'm asking for a name. Long pause. "I'll call you back," Cassidy said. She called back 40 minutes later. 3 of the 6 have been excluded for other reasons. Of the remaining 3, 1 was on a business trip and out of touch with the system. That leaves 2, analyst Warren and a coordinator named Blake Dorsey. "Dorsey," Marcella repeated. "Do you know him?" "No, but Blake Dorsey isn't a boy's name in the traditional sense." She paused. "Tell me, is it a man's name or a woman's name?" "Male, 37 years old, has been working as an operations coordinator for 8 years. Does he have connections to Texas?" "I'll check." "Check. And one more thing. That night, when exactly was the route to Harris Hospital agreed upon? Who made the decision?" "Narvaez made the decision on his own in the field. He radioed in 20 minutes before his arrival." "Is the radio on the open air?" "Encrypted channel, which someone could listen in on if they had the encryption key," Marcella said. Cassidy didn't answer. That was an answer too. The next morning, the silver Nissan was gone from the school. This could mean anything. They'd changed cars, or they'd decided to move on to the next stage. Marcella was working the day shift. It was business as usual. A pediatric patient with appendicitis, 3 people after a car accident, an elderly couple, both with high blood pressure, both refusing to be admitted to the ward because someone had to feed the cat. Narvaez texted her during her lunch break. One word, "Dorsey." She replied, "I know." Then there was nothing for 3 minutes. Then, "He's in Houston. He arrived last night. Officially, it's a scheduled audit of the regional office." Marcella looked at her phone. "Where?" "Hyatt Hotel on Louisiana Street. 11th floor." She put the phone down, ate half of the sandwich, then finished her coffee. Then she wrote, "I want to talk to him myself." Long pause. "It's not your job. For 8 years I was told that finding people like this was my job. Don't tell me that it's my job." Another pause. Cassidy versus. "Tell Cassidy I'm not asking for permission. I'm stating my intention." The difference is fundamental. The phone was silent for 2 minutes. Then, "Don't do anything irreversible." The Hyatt on Louisiana Street is a typical business hotel. A glass facade, a ground floor restaurant, and conference rooms. Such spaces are good at concealing people who simply want to be part of the background. Marcella arrived at 7:30 in the evening. There was nothing extra in her bag. She left her bulletproof vest at home. So did her gun. She didn't come here for conflict. Dorsey was found in a restaurant on the ground floor. His description matched. Average height, light brown hair, wearing a blue business suit. He was eating a steak alone, looking at his laptop. Nothing suspicious. A typical business traveler. Marcella walked over to the table and sat down opposite. He looked up. He recognized her by that slight, momentary hesitation that only someone who wasn't expecting can hide. He wasn't expecting it, but he held up well. "Marcella Dominique," he said, his voice even. "I didn't expect you here." "I know," she said. The waiter came over to ask about the menu. She asked for water. She waited until he left. "You passed the information on to the wrong people," she said. "I want to know why." Dorsey looked at her. Something in his face changed. Not fear, but something akin to weariness. "You can't prove it," he said. "Not yet," she agreed. "But Cassidy is working on it, and what she finds will be far worse for you than this conversation. I didn't come for proof. I came for understanding." "Why do you need understanding?" "Because I'm followed by people who think I have something I don't. I want them to stop. If I understand the motive, I understand how to diffuse the situation, without it becoming irreversible." Dorsey was silent. He poured himself some water and drank half a glass. "Ford paid me for 7 years," he said finally. "Not regularly, just occasionally, for information that seemed harmless. Roots. Time slots. Nothing that could harm living people. So far, it hasn't done any harm." "So far, it hasn't done any harm," he agreed quietly. "I didn't know about the hospital. I gave them directions, just directions. They said they wanted to intercept the vehicles on the highway. Be quiet. I didn't know they were going to the hospital." "But you knew what you were carrying." Pause. "Yes. And you knew who was driving, including me. I found out about you later, after, when I realized what happened at the hospital." He looked at her. "I didn't give them your name. They found it themselves when they started sorting through that night." "The drive," Marcella said. "The third flash drive. Who took it?" "A man named Sears. He worked for Ford directly, outside of the Vectis structure. I don't know him personally. I only know that he's in Dallas now and that he has orders. Either hand over the carrier or destroy it if there's a risk of capture." "If Ceres destroys the carrier, will those who are watching me lose their reason to look for me?" "Theoretically, yes, but they're not sure you didn't make a copy, so..." "That's why they won't leave until they see it for themselves." "Yes." Marcella looked at him, a tired man, not a villain, just a man who once made a choice in favor of money, and that choice dragged him deeper and deeper like a swamp. "You need to call Cassidy," she said, "tonight. Everything you know about Ceres, names, contacts, address in Dallas, everything. If you do this, you'll have a chance," she said. "Not a guarantee, a chance. That's the only thing I can offer you." She stood up. She left a business card on the table with only a phone number, no name, no information. "Think quickly," she said. "Quickly means until tomorrow morning." And she left. Dorsey called Cassidy at 10:30 that night. Marcella found out about this at 11:45, when Narvez wrote to her. He talks. A lot. There was a group working in Dallas, not hers, someone else's. Marcella was sitting at home, drinking her second tea of the evening and looking at her phone with Amelia's photo on the lock screen. At 1 o'clock in the morning, a message came from Cassidy. "The carrier is in our hands. Sears is detained." Marcella replied, "Okay." Then she wrote another message. "Has the surveillance on me been removed?" A response within 5 minutes. "We're filming for an hour. The last 2 are leaving. We apologize for the inconvenience." Marcella put her phone down and sat in silence. She stood up. She walked into Amelia's room, just like that. Blue curtains with fish on them, a stuffed shark on the bed, framed swimming diplomas on the wall, her first, her second, and the very same silver one Amelia had received the day before yesterday. She straightened the diplomas. One was hanging slightly crooked. I returned to the kitchen and finished my tea. Tomorrow was the morning shift. A month after Ford's arrest, the federal court for the Southern District of Texas accepted the case on charges of organizing an armed attack on diplomatic personnel, conspiring to conceal evidence, and unlawful use of force on the grounds of a civilian medical facility. The latter charge was added separately at the insistence of the prosecutor's office, which wanted to set a precedent. Marcela read about this on her phone while standing in line at the corner coffee shop on Wednesday morning. She liked the article, put her phone away, ordered a coffee to go and a croissant.